Now, on this video, we encountered a problem that we suspected we might have with Vlad's carbon fiber parts that are very old and made the old school way, where there's release agent on the outer surface everywhere, in between the fibers, because the fibers are not neat and clean like it would be on a modern vacuum bagging part. So I know this is going to be challenging, and I tried a couple of the things. None of them really cured the problem, so what I did is I sprayed on 3 more extra coats of clear, building up as much as I can. So I'm going to try to sand it down in the future. This is going to have to dry for a while. And if you'd like to watch this video in 4K, just set your device like that. So this is the next in the V series of videos that we're doing on all of Vlad's projects. Vlad's projects started out to be 3 restorations. It's now 5. So we got parts. Today we're going to concentrate on, and I waited for a day that it looks like it's not going to rain until lunchtime. I waited for a day we can get the beginning of the clear on. Now, because these parts are old and there's a lot of defects in them, I'm going to be putting more than a normal amount of clear on, and then just hoping they don't have an issue in the future of cracking. But I've got to start with something. I've got to start with getting 2 or 3 light coats on and letting it dry overnight, and that's what we're going to try to get done today. So every day starts off here kind of in a predictable way. We have to feed the fish, feed the birds, do the perp walk in the garden. We're almost coming up on harvest time here, and we'll check in with Vlad again and see if he had any luck finding any more choices of silver paint for that MV Augusta part is making him crazy. It's making me crazy too. But in the meantime, today we're just going to be shooting some clear, and we're going to try to get these old defective carbon parts to look as good as we possibly can. Oh, there's just nothing better in the morning than feeding the birds and having a nice cup of coffee. And somehow the coffee always tastes better after you feed the birds. Well, we got our first little pepper off the pepper plant today. Our cucumber plants are already holding on for dear life, climbing up the trellis, and a couple days from now we're going to have cucumbers.
You want to see if there's any down there?
There's our first pickable cucumber.
That goes tomorrow.
We're saving that for Miles.
Take it out.
I'll harvest it. Our zucchinis are starting to grow. We're going to have blueberry zucchini bread. What did you make last year?
Look over here. Look at this.
Another one.
Can you see this?
And this is what Karen and I enjoy about having a garden. Every morning we do this. We do what we call the perp walk, and pretty soon we're going to be doing the perp harvest every day. So today when I start painting and putting on the clear, I have to be real careful. I don't want to get any disruption of Karen's garden. She's really passionate about this garden. And the carrots will be ready to harvest by this weekend.
No,
longer?
No.
They're already coming up out of ground.
It doesn't matter. They come out at the end of the summer.
Right from the day we started these 3 restorations, which became 5, we've had issues with everything. This has been just an unbelievable year for doing restorations. But I did prep up on a previous video, and they're all on the V series. These parts are all prepped. They need to be wiped down with prep oil, Prepsol, whatever you have as a degreasing agent, and we'll be ready to put some clear on. Now, my theory and feeling is you always start with the smallest part first, because what happens with these parts when they're old like this, or even new, carbon fiber, you sometimes have a real problem with fish eyes. And this is the clear that we're going to be using. And the most important thing for us on our shop conditions is that we use the fast hardener. Now, I have a theory. I always leave the tip of the gun in a jar of acetone, and the clear gun has his own jar of acetone, and as opposed to the ones with tinted paint or pigmented paint. And when I put that on, I'll do a little test spray, a little acetone through the gun first, make sure we're perfectly clear, because these parts, they are any carbon fiber. Any little defect in them is going to float right on top of the carbon. Not going to be able to bury it in paint. Another big step whenever you're doing clear, and this is a really good thing, I always leave the compressor valve open. It's open to the atmosphere. I'll plug it in, run it for a few minutes, then open the valve, blow out any moisture that's in there, and there should be almost none. And when I'm done with the day, blow out all the old air. Now, in my heart of hearts, I knew when Vlad brought these parts, I looked at the condition, the amount of grease and residue that was on them, dirt and filth and chain lube, and I knew we were going to have a problem. So using the clear, there's several different things you can do to try to get around this, and I was hoping I'd take the path of least resistance. That really didn't work out the way I wanted to. But there are several other things. Now, mixing up the paint, keeping it from dripping all over the place, that's all been on previous videos, and I know people appreciate those tips. Once I get out here, the trick is, and I've learned this even from modeling, is get the coats on thin, a lot of coats and thin. And sometimes, if you're lucky, that'll tend to minimize the fisheye. But in this case, the minute I did the first part, and that's why I always start with the smallest part, I knew right away this was going to be a tremendous problem if we were going to try to restore these to something that I'd be happy with, or Vlad would be happy with. So I really took my time. Now, this was a nice day, and the sun was out, and it was about 80 degrees. It was really nice. And I could see right away when I went to put that aside, was that disappointing. And maybe from some angles you don't see the fisheyes, but when you look up close, I said, oh, we're in trouble now. Now that's going to be at least 1 or 2 extra days of labor and work to fix that. So my first thing to try is while it's wet, soak up a paper towel and acetone and just rub it off like you were waxing a car. Now, a lot of times this will help. It's not going to totally cure it, but it'll get rid of some of them. You'll seal some of those little pockets that we call fisheyes. Doesn't work all the time, but it'll minimize what you have to do. In this case, it minimized it, but we still had major problems with these parts. So that was one thing that sometimes works. It didn't really cure the whole problem today. It took a chunk out of it, but didn't cure it. And I remember when Turbo Steve had his seat, and we just had fisheyes everywhere. We actually went down to the body shop and bought some stuff that you add to the paint. It was $20. Spent $20, put it in the paint. Same amount of fisheyes, didn't do anything. So, and on the internet, there's a million people with a million opinions of how to get rid of it. And the only way I know how to get rid of it, that it's really going to work in the end, that we'll be happy with this, I've got to get enough material on there now that I can sand through the material and go back and forth 2 or 3 times until I've buried all the fisheyes in paint. And it sounds like that's really labor intensive, and it is. So this is so you can see the fisheyes right in the middle of the part. This is a very common thing with old carbon fiber. Now, if this were painted, if Vlad wanted to paint this part black, we'd get rid of that in a minute. We put primer sealer on it. But there's no primer sealer that's going to fix those fisheyes. None that I know of. So I knew by the time I started the second part, I knew there's more than likely all this carbon fiber was done by the same manufacturer under the same conditions. And it's really junk, to be honest. And Vlad knows that, of course, and we're not trying to fool anybody, but he got me some carbon fiber for the MT09 that's absolutely perfect right out of the mold. But back in the day, they didn't know how to do this. They were unaware. So what happens with this, it's like a waffle. The upper surface is like a waffle, and in between all the little ridges, like where the waffle syrup would be, what happens is you wind up, it's terrible, you wind up with the mold release agent that they put on the part when they pulled it out of the mold. And then if they bury it in some kind of finish, which I don't even know if they put a finish on this. But I know one thing, when I started cleaning these parts, you could go on forever with these. Now, I'm already starting to think of the nuclear option here, because I can see as I'm doing this, if the first 2 parts are bad, the next 2 are probably going to be just as bad. Putting them out in the sun, you can see the fisheyes in there, and there's nobody at fault for that. In the old days, they really didn't know how to eliminate that. That was a real problem back then. Now, anybody who's done any real amount of painting, believe me, they've run into problems like this. When you run into these problems on a painted part, there's a lot of solutions. But on carbon fiber, where you're only going to clear coat it, the solutions are very labor intensive. And I'm hoping this is ultimately going to work. But again, today it just confirmed in my mind that these parts are really going to need a real amount of labor to go into them. I'm not sure Vlad is going to want to spend that amount of time, energy, money. I don't know. But because our channel is dedicated to sharing useful information, this is useful information, because if you're going to pull a carbon fiber part off your bike and try to paint it and you run into fish eyes, why, good luck, Ghostbusters. So, and again, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube. You can watch these body shop things, and they add this to the paint and that to the paint, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I have never really found a permanent solution for this, other than doing what I'm going to have to do with these parts, is just sand and paint and sand and paint and sand and paint until I have enough material on there that all the little valleys are now going to be full of clear. And I don't know how long that's going to take. It's not going to be cheap and quick. Now, way back in the day, I made 2 model airplanes, one of Miss Ashley, the Reno Air Racer, and one of an F7 Tiger Cat. I made the fuselages out of carbon fiber. I think I might have been the first one to do it. If there's somebody else did it, I didn't know about it. But anyway, I documented how I had to get the carbon fiber when I took it out of the mold, and it was a reverse mold, a female mold. When I took it out of the mold, it wasn't even anywhere near as bad as this, but it still had so many fish eyes. And the way I got around it, and that was with Brodak dope back in the day, I had to silk span. Modelers know what silk span is. That's not appropriate for a job like this. It works on modeling. It'll cover up but then you have to paint it. So I'm right back to where if I have to, I need something like clear primer sealer. So the next step on this, I've got to get together with Vlad, let him look at the amount of work this is going to be to straighten this out and see if he wants to do it, or if he's got some other solution, or he just wants to replace the parts, or again, it's Vlad's decision to make. So sharing this information about working on old carbon fiber parts, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating, just like that MV Augusta, that you can't get the matching paint easily. Now, I don't know that we're going to be able to make this a whole lot better. I don't know, because years ago when they made these parts, and these are old parts, they used everything in the world for a release agent, and that got in between at a microscopic level of the fibers. Now, you might be thinking, well, why not just sand down and get rid of that? When you do, you leave a scar in the carbon, and these parts are all full of scars already, so it's really, our goal here was to make this look better. Maybe we've already done that, I don't know. They were pretty rough to begin with. But there's another part of this. I don't know how much effort or money or time or whatever, or material Vlad's going to want to spend on these parts. I don't know. In the worst of all worlds, I thought of another cure for this whole thing. Could take it to a place that they wrap cars and maybe have it all wrapped, sand it all down and wrap it with clear material. Maybe Vlad wants to buy some of that clear material and see if we can do it. I don't know, but I know fish eyeing on old carbon fiber parts. Turbo Steve had this problem on one of his fiberglass part, the seat he made for the bike. We bought it, stuff that was supposed to get rid of the fish eyes, didn't work. This, sometimes that thing I showed, wiping it off, if it doesn't get rid of it, it'll minimize it. I've done it to all these parts. It doesn't seem to matter. That material that's causing the fish eyes is embedded right into the carbon. So I don't know. The next step on this, I'll have to check in with Vlad when this dries. And this is the ongoing adventure of the V series of videos. So we do have probably 3 or 4 days, a week maybe, the way the weather is, to think about what we're going to try for the next solution to this. And believe me, this is not the kind of thing that just jumps out of the can. And my apologies, my neighbor next door is rebuilding his garage and there's hammering going on over there, and it's difficult to shoot video in a garage. But anyway, the whole thing here is to share the information, whether it's good or whether it's bad, and this is a common problem when you're working on old carbon fiber stuff. And whatever solution we ultimately come up with, believe me, it's not a very easy decision to make. When you're working within a budget or you're working within a time constraint, it gets to be a difficult decision. When you have unlimited money and you can buy parts from Partzilla, the whole thing changes. Older bikes, not so much. You're roped, you're backed into a corner here. And to be honest, I know Vlad wants these to be as good as we possibly can get them. I want to get them. And I'm going to try to, on the next time we get to work on this, I will share whether it takes me 2 more days of work or 5 more days or
somewhere down the road, I hope I have a solution and I'll share it with you. And thanks so much for watching.